everyone, here's your video on factoring and graphing to solve quadratics. So this is lesson 1 of unit 7. So when we factor to solve, we're going to use something called the zero product law. And all the zero product law means and says is that if you multiply multiple things together, so let's just use numbers here like 3 times something, right? We're going to fill in a blank. If those two things that multiply together equal 0, one of those factors has to be 0. So, or one of those numbers. So the only thing that can go in for that question mark to equal 0 would be 0. So how does this help us? Well, let's see how it works as we factor here. So let's look at example A. This is already in factored form. We have the factor x minus 7 times the other factor x plus 2. Now, since those are multiplied together, there's a little multiplication there, and they're set equal to 0. That means that either the factor x minus 7 has to equal 0, or the factor x plus 2 equals 0. Now what you do with this, once we've set up these little equations, I can solve each of those for x, and it would give me the value of x that would make the whole equation equal to 0. So here on the left, I would add 7. So one solution is x equals 7, and then if I subtract 2, I get x equals negative 2. Now these are my two solutions to the quadratic. Now what do I mean when I say it makes the equation equal to 0? Well, let's just look at this first, guys, to explain what this means. If I put 7 in for these x's, I will have 7 minus 7 times 7 plus 2. Well, 7 minus 7 is 0 times 9, which equals 0. So when I put 7 in, it makes the whole equation equal to 0. All right? So those are the two solutions for part A. I can use the zero product law to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Part B, I have to decide the factoring method. Now here I have two terms, but remember I always look for a GCF first. Turns out this does have a GCF of 6. So I'm going to divide 6 out of both sides. And I'll have 6 times x squared minus 25 equals 0. Now I'm not done factoring, because what I want to do is I now have to factor that x squared minus 25 using the difference of squares. So this will be 6 times x plus 5 times x minus 5 equals 0. Now I can set my factors equal to 0. Now in this problem, I'm not going to worry about this 6. Because if I set 6 equal to 0, that's a false statement. 6 is not equal to 0. You only have to set the factors that had an x with them equal to 0. So if this said 6x times x plus 5 times x minus 5, then I would set it equal to 0. But since there's no x, I'm going to ignore it, and I'm just going to set these other two factors with x's equal to 0. When I solve them, I get the solutions of x equals negative 5 and x equals, when you add, positive 5 there. All right, we've done a lot of factoring to solve throughout different units, or it's been thrown in. We haven't talked about it too much. So when I look at C, 4x equals negative 16x minus 7. Now in order to do this one, I need to set the equation equal to 0 first. That's your first step here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move everything, this negative 16x and negative 7, to the left so that the 4x squared stays positive. So I'm going to add 16x and add 7 to the left side. So I'll have 4x squared plus 16x plus 7. You cannot solve by factoring unless you are set equal to 0. Now there's no GCF here. It looks like what I have to do is split the middle. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to 28 and add to 16, which I will make 14 and 2. All right, so let's bring this down here. So I'll bring out my first term, 4x squared, plus 14x, plus 2x, plus 7, all that equals 0. All right, so I factor by grouping now. Put the first two terms in a group, the last two. I pull out a GCF, so I have 2x times 2x plus 7. And here on the right, the only GCF is 1. Now technically, I'm going to keep writing equal to 0 because that's still an equation. It's just a different form of it, set equal to 0. Then my factored form here is 2x plus 1 times 2x plus 7 equals 0. And now I'm in factored form, so I can set both of those factors equal to 0 and solve them for x. So on the left, I subtract 1 and then divide by 2. So one solution is negative 1/2. This right guy here, I would subtract 7 and then divide by 2. So the other solution is negative 7/2, or negative 3.5. All right, so that is the factor to solve part. There is some practice on this, so make sure that you do the practice, that you remember how to factor things, and that you can use the zero product solve. All right, there'll be another video for the graph to solve part.